Thank you for spending a little bit of your lunchtime with me today. My name's Eric Schudiske, and will be a little bit of a PR boot camp. I want to start with a little story, and the story goes, I'm skeptical of PR. That's the entire little story. And I can tell you why I'm skeptical of PR is because I've approached PR from all different perspectives. So I've been a reporter, I've been in-house at a large global tech company, and I've been a consultant working for many PR clients simultaneously. So there's PR that is an excellent investment in your future as a professional and your company's future, and I've seen that done exceptionally well. There's PR that's not done well and hampers your ability to be successful. And I think worst of all is PR not done at all, which leaves your dreams and aspirations potentially unfulfilled. So a little bit about me in way of background. This is not a horrible logo design contest. These are some of the places where I've worked. I started my career in television and radio news. Each of these stations you see on, it'll be your left, is a place where I read dozens or hundreds of press releases every week, where I told stories to people who needed to know, wanted to understand the world around them, and much of that news comes out of local companies. Some of these stations, you can see the top two are Seattle stations. Others are in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. As a young radio reporter, I was in Janesville, Wisconsin, and interviewed a first-term congressman named Paul Ryan. One of his first interviews. Interviewed a first lady along the way, and have been embedded with search and rescue during hurricane rescues. And then moved in-house. Moved out of television news, moved in-house to a global tech company that's here in Seattle, and ran campaigns that reached around the world, especially the collaboration between the PR space and the social media space, and that's where I really flourished, and where I think we'll talk a little bit today about how to combine those two to be able to amplify your message. And then working as a consultant, taking a lot of at-bats at C-level communications, speech writing, placements of content. And let's talk a little bit about the roller coaster ride ahead for us. So here's what we're going to talk about today. Why PR, what it can do for you. I think most people in this room might be able to relate. I've got $4 in my pocket. How can I do PR? That'll lead us to DIY, your approach to PR. When to press go on PR efforts. 3 must-do nows. And there'll be a dividing line on what you do when based on are you pre-launch, launch, or post-launch. And of course, funding factors in as well. But I'll offer you 3 must-do nows for consideration, if you haven't already, to kind of lay the foundation for your PR efforts ahead. I'll also discuss a little bit of low probability press outreach, how perhaps not to do media relations. Take a look at the reporters you would be dealing with, and then flip that around and look at some more higher probability press outreach opportunities. And then we're going to evolve into some Lewis Carrolls. We're going to try and build some content rabbit holes that you can drive media and influencers into to help tell your story. And we'll talk about some media, press, or influencer collaterals. And then, as we all dream and hope, I now have more than $4. How do I do media outreach? So why PR? So on this slide, you might notice 3 recent PR disasters have played out in the media before us. I would submit to you that these are not solely PR disasters. These are governance disasters long in the making that have been realized in the public realm. And public relations has then been required to mitigate, ideally. And Sean Spicer should at this point also be wearing Adidas shoes. They recently sent out an email congratulating people for surviving the Boston Marathon. Not the best PR, and maybe he'd have a blood test by Theranos as well. they've recently run into some significant issues. So let's talk a little bit about beyond the press release. What can you do for PR? So as we saw earlier with the slide of Sean Spicer holding a Pepsi on a United Airlines flight, PR is also an insurance policy. It allows a lens to look through in which you can see the message that you're sending the world and allow you to vet that message in a way that will diminish the ability for that message to produce self-harm. And more truly, tell your larger story, which is what we want. We want to reduce the drag coefficient on your message, allow that message to be as widely populated as possible. So not only does it safeguard your reputation, it can also increase your company valuation. The best companies are companies we heard, know, and understand, and can research. So this is the Lewis Carroll effect. You want to build these rabbit holes, you want people to be able to deep dive, so think narrow and deep as opposed to wide and shallow for your content. You know, how can I be an expert in my field as opposed to how can I be an expert about everything in everyone else's field? Try to narrow your focus. And this is an important point because ideally this isn't your only company. So you spin off, you acquire, you merge, you sell. How can we position you as executives so that your next company funding becomes easier, talent acquisition becomes easier, so there's a profile building effect to public relations as well. And we're in such a competitive labor market, so PR can have the effect of allowing you to attract and retain higher level talent. Very positive effect of PR and increase your market share and potential for acquisition. So these are all parts that drive the PR machine. So what tools are in that tool chest? So PR, you're going to be looking at influencer relationships, you're negotiating media exclusives, stakeholder engagement, content placement. You know, these are some of the items that you can expect from public relations and communications. Executive team, placement. I know Jordan, who's in the audience today, just went and gave a speech out in the Midwest. You know, securing that speaking engagement, writing the speech, making sure that you're also meeting with stakeholders along the way. And then here's a switch that I hope we can toggle together today. You'll often hear in the PR world about storytellers. My goal today is that we become story finders. And one example of this is I worked at a larger, I say larger because I think we're in companies that are in the 1 to 5 space as far as headcount. So this company was 45, so it seems much larger. But we had a social media team. I had a social media team that was combined with customer relations. And a customer relations person came to me and said, we just had a customer email us and ask what a game piece weighs and what it's made of. Which she could have easily just pinged back and said, it's made of aluminum, it weighs 0.25 ounces. Instead, we discussed it, she emailed back, asked a few questions, and you'll notice there's a picture on here. There's an astronaut holding a piece of material that is that game piece. So the question was asked by an associate of a US astronaut who was interested in taking our game piece to the International Space Station. We thought that's a pretty good idea. So out of that one email and this story finder mentality, we built a global campaign and ended up hosting nearly 1,000 events around the world to watch and celebrate the launch of a Soyuz rocket carrying this US astronaut, who I have an autograph of on my desk, which I really like. But it was a cohesive moment and something that could have fallen through the cracks. So I would ask you to think about these stories. Where are they not just with me, my vendors, my potential employees, my research, my IP? You know, where are these stories that aren't being told currently? Or that, and here's a good litmus test. And we'd use this when we were reporters. When you come back to the news station, what's the first thing you tell your friend in the cube next to you? If you're going home and you're talking to your partner, you're talking to your friend, and you say, this really cool thing happened, maybe that's the news story. Maybe that's how you reach out to press, because it's cool enough to share with someone else. So that often changes the lead of our story when we're reporters. So you're going to ideally work at mining this PR gold from inside your apparatus already. So here's our switch over to bootcamp. So how to DIY PR. And this will depend on where you are in your pre-launch, launch, or post-launch. And I gave you an extra $1 on the screen too. So I said $4, I could only find a graphic with $5. So 20% raise already. I think we're doing pretty well. So your approach pre-launch, and this is, was anyone here last year? That's great because this slide will seem so brand new to everyone else. So this is the one slide that's new from, or repeating from last year. So my approach would be to think of PR and communications as synesthesia. So for those unfamiliar, that's the thought that your different taste, sight, hearing, all your senses are not independent verticals, but rather collaborate. So this is where we get terms like bitter cold or loud colors, with this combination of senses. So in that story finder mentality, you're looking at your whole organization and your business plan as not just siloed into lead gen, not just siloed into HR, but rather a whole organism built to produce a story that is your story. So when to press go on PR. So we'll get to what you can do even before you press go. But here's what you would need prior to saying, let's just launch a large PR campaign, DIY or otherwise. Is your brand locked up? Do you have a well-defined brand? Is it something that you have stress tested? We definitely want the ability to evolve brands throughout time. We also want the ability to feel secure in having a message that we know won't rebound back to us. Where are you in your launch strategy? And then some logistical questions. Do you have time? You know, this is the resource we're dealing with almost more than money. Do you have time and bandwidth to make a launch, to commit to the planning? And this is one that's often overlooked. Is there someone willing to talk to the media, willing to be quoted? And I think inherent in that is availability. When I have a reporter call and want to talk to a CEO, they want to talk to that CEO in the next hour. So is that inborn availability there? Some people prize that, other people perhaps don't. So here would be my suggestion for 3 must-do nows. And being in an academic setting, we also have a little extra credit at the end. So 1, set alerts. You know, start your monitoring now. Not just on you, but your competition and influencers in your space. And I think in this crowd especially, when you think of influencers, think of investors. Who are your investors following? Who do they listen to? Who do they respect? Because this will be a feedback loop that informs who you target as journalists. You know, if they only follow BuzzFeed for some reason, or only TechCrunch but not GeekWire, or only GeekWire and not Popular Mechanics. You know, where do they find value in their reporting? Because that will help guide who your outreach targets. So you also want to see where your brand is positioned. Your brand is mentioned, but also, maybe even more importantly, where your potential competition is mentioned. This also helps inform your PR picture. My next suggestion would be to publish an is opinion piece. Blank is blank for blank industry. You're going to set yourself up as a thought leader, because you are, in a very niche field. And in terms of publication, you have several options. So you not only have, if you have a site, of course that's ideal. There's a site called Medium, which I hope you've heard of or read, medium.com, where you can self-publish, and is very popular and very shareable. And then you also have affiliate sites. UW sites perhaps, WTIA, I know accepts guest blog posts. That's the Washington Technology Industry Association. They accept guest blog posts. So find a way to put yourself in a location, and this is a location that will be a bank deposit. because you might not use it this month or next month or in the next 3 months, but you want a hard link that you can drive people back to that can help tell your story. And that is searchable. So there's I have opinions on opinion pieces, but specifically, don't inundate yourself with requirements as far as word count. You can make this happen in 300 to 500 words. You want images, you want links. You want links back to your page. You want people to be able to find you and track you and learn more about you. These will be your customers, your clients, your investors, your potential employees. You're creating a footprint and then you're publishing it. And it can sit there. It can be silent for a little while, but you want to have that in your back pocket. And then track your media and influencers. What are the reporters that your investors might be following? What are they writing about? What are your reporters who your clients or potential customers following? What are they writing about? How can you interject yourself into that conversation? Because you have a voice. And extra credit, and really small at the bottom, is an aspirational exercise. And it's a headline writing exercise, and we use this occasionally in workshops. And the exercise is write your headline. What do you want to see in print? And this will allow you to point at something on the wall and to clarify your message. Headlines are 7 words at most. So you have to get really narrow with it. An example would be blank redefines blank, ushering in a new era of blank. What are your blanks in those categories? How are you redefining an industry? How are you improving the world around you? Changing an experience. And as a hint to help guide news, in the evolution of that word itself, news is new. Very easy, very easy. And that's a question we'd have in editorial meetings every morning. Is it new? Is it new? And if the answer is no, we don't have a story. So I want to take you through a low probability press release. And if you've already fallen asleep reading what's on your right, you probably wouldn't be alone. So what's on your right is a press release that maybe even by design might not be inclined to get picked up. It's a municipal press release. Before you even read a headline that is more than 7 words, you have to get through a logo. And here's a pet peeve that I'll point to. A media contact, what's more important than the story itself? The person who you'd have to call to talk to about the story. So that's in the wrong spot, how I might approach it. And press releases should be very clear that they're press releases. For immediate release is perhaps outdated. So too long, full of weeds, buried headline, a boring headline, not personalized, no image, and important to note that reporters never open attachments. So avoid sending attachments to reporters, but send links. You can send links. And again, just too long. So why does this fail? We're going to take a brief moment and explore the psychology of a reporter. So know your reporter. So reporters, especially in today's environment, whether they're tech reporters, whether they're traditional media reporters, or whether they're influencers in your space. Maybe they have a blog that you're interested in publishing on. They're typically juggling between 3 and 15 stories at any given time. They need to know very quickly what you would like to tell them. So I would read dozens of press releases a day on certain days, and I'd read about 7 words. And I'd look through and see if it's news that day. If they didn't mention my name, if they didn't mention a story I'd worked on, how this story that they're talking about might fit with that, I'd move on in the world. And reporters are judged by exclusives. If you're sending out a press release to 100 people, the value of that press release is diminished 100 times. So there are definitely ways in which you can send information to a single reporter and have that information reach thousands of media outlets. So the Associated Press, Reuters, these are syndicated services that reach the globe. So rethink how you might be doing press outreach. So this would be an example of how I would typically approach media outreach. And I'm just going to walk you through this, and I've redlined some of the intention in the script. So how I approach media relations is a musket mentality, in that you get one shot. And you don't want to waste anyone's time, let alone your time, in pitching a story that might not be the right story at the right time. So plan your approach. So, hi, reporter name, I'm the, introduce yourself briefly, and unfortunately they've done polling, and credibility for spokespeople is exceptionally low compared to CEOs and inventors. So if you're you have a greater ability to attract media attention, as opposed to I'm a spokesperson for, that might be put in a different pile. Caught your story on, so you're writing like a human being, you're engaged in their reporting. I'm researching the frontier of blank. I would love to exclusively, and that's just music for a journalist, share with you some sort of engaging collateral, whether it's video. I've added a screenshot here, the newest, latest, first, so kind of meeting that criteria for new, of its kind, and then deliver. There has to be a there. And here's the link to my latest, and I'll show you an example of some media collateral in this next slide. I'm available, so you're showing an interest. And then let them know that this is a perishable moment, that you will not sustain this exclusive opportunity for an indefinite period of time. So let them know that if they'd like to be in contact, that's fantastic. Otherwise, you'll keep them informed with the latest in their lab. And as a reporter, I've often been approached for one story and wanted something else from them for a different story. When I was working at geocaching, which is the tech startup I worked at, I pitched Reuters on a story, and they weren't particularly interested, but I also then gave them, as you see here, 3 other bullet points. We're also launching on the new, this will date the story a little bit, launching on the new Microsoft phone, so we're a launch partner for Microsoft. And 2 other, we have an interesting space, if you ever profile spaces, and 1 or 2 other points. And he picked me up on the Microsoft story. So not what I intended, but he knew that I was willing to work with him on additional stories. So we made Reuters and more than 800 publications around the globe related to this one story, because I wasn't focused on my niche story. I was focused on making it into the media. And then in that story, we had the 1 bullet point we wanted to share about our product, which made it in the story as well. If you don't, I think this still applies. Okay. Because you're going to introduce yourself, you're going to let them know that you know them because you've seen their story, and you're also going to keep it short. Okay. So they can breeze over it, and you're 6 to 8 sentences. So they can skim that, they can see that you have links in, and then even if I bullet point sometimes, even if you bullet point, 2 other things. I can take you into a wet lab, I can show you a nuclear accelerator, whatever you might have in stock. So this is an example of where a link might move. So I recently did some work for a VR company up on Capitol Hill. They're playing in the gaming space as a proof of performance product. And it's just 2 pages. But then you have this concept where you're also going to drive them deeper with additional content. So 1 link gets them to this 2-pager, which gives a description of their company, short and long. It gives a little bit of background on their tech company, so they're a publisher. Release dates, their website where you can find them on social, some features about their product, and then backgrounds. And you can see the backgrounds on the 2 key players, very short. But then you see the media collaterals, we have images, and we also have video. So that can be produced as well. So now, imagine you have more than $4. How do you proceed with PR? So I'm hoping through this perspective, it helps demystify public relations and communications a little bit. It helps allow you to see the wider picture. This is, as we saw at the first slide, can go terribly wrong. But not potentially for lack of PR, lack of governance, that the public has become aware of something that perhaps you didn't mean the public to become aware of. So this is also linear in some way, as in, here's your buffet. That actually doesn't look very appetizing. Probably should have chosen a better buffet option. But fried food buffet. So you have your buffet options, DIY, which I think is how most people begin the operation. You know, how can I engage one reporter? How can I establish rapport? And that's a great place to start because it begins that learning curve around PR. I've then seen and have advised individuals to employ an entry-level part-time individual to start building that content. You know, how can we have blog posts? How can we stand up a Facebook page, a Twitter profile, a homepage? Hourly contractor, harder and harder to find now, but important. And I think in the Seattle market, they're in abundance. There are project-based fees. So you can say, we have a product launch. I need a 3-month campaign. You know, give me a scope of work and a budget. And then get some competing bids. And what I hope people evolve into, and what larger companies tend to do, and where I was employed at geocaching, we'd often do, is you'd have in-house complemented by contract for some of the heavy hitting. So you have 3 different price points. You have independents. I'm currently an independent, which is on the lower end of the scale. And I think when you think of these 4 buckets, it's going to be scope and their range of experience will be the differentiator in price. So you have 1 or 2 or 3 people, independents. You know, your ability to exercise a larger campaign will be hampered. Then you can go up to global and be able to very smoothly pull off a global campaign, spending $100,000 or $200,000 a month. So there's quite a bit of room to play in that space. But as we've seen, if you have $4, it's a pretty good place to invest it. All right, I'd love to entertain any questions, and I'd also like to leave you, I have some contact information, so feel free to put that down. Yeah, I can give you an example. So I knew for the product that I worked on, the demographic I wanted to reach were military. So Stars and Stripes was my goal publication. I had a very difficult time getting into Stars and Stripes. I did have, through the story finder mentality, I did have a woman who was playing the game who discovered dog tags in the woods while geocaching. She found the soldier who lost the dog tags 10 years earlier, and he had dementia. And she was able to reunite. She was emailing me the entire time. I was telling her to take pictures. I built out a blog post around this story that I did not publish, had the entire story in a bow, and I started searching that demographic area. It was around Detroit. So I contacted a Detroit Free Press reporter who had recently written about treasure hunting a few months earlier. So it wasn't exceptionally new, so she could revisit that story. And I pitched her an exclusive because I knew that the Detroit Free Press reaches out to the AP, and the AP picks up their stories. And I also knew that if the AP picked it up, because I thought it was a pretty great story, I thought it was likely the AP would pick it up, that I could then ping the Stars and Stripes to pick up the story as well. And it ended up working. So we're able to give her a beautiful exclusive. She then put the story up, the AP picked it up, and hundreds of newspapers around the country also then picked up the story, and then I was able to ping Stars and Stripes, who were glad to take that story. I think there's definitely judgment there. Having been in the industry for more than a decade, you get kind of a spider sense about it. So there's a threshold that needs to be met, and some of that is new, some of that is impact. And in this case, it was sentimentality. It's a very warm story. It's courageous. So does it have these elements which make it approachable? And in that case, it was a no-brainer. I mean, there's no downside to that story. So I think there's that vetting process that needs to be done. There's also a case to be made for press releases. I don't want to say that press releases are not a tool in that tool chest. But I find if you're sending out more than 12 media contacts at any given time about the same story, you might need to revisit your strategy a little bit. So media pitch, I think context will be different. I think you might have an in-person, elevator pitch with a reporter. I think they're not dissimilar. I think your pitch for a media entity would be much more robust in that you'll be able to allow them to see deeper information. They're very similar, but they'll have to be a now or a there. Like what makes it, with media, you always want this is happening now. Why is this important? So your elevator pitch may be we're developing, and your media pitch might be tomorrow we are launching. So I think that urgency needs to be there in any media pitch versus elevator pitch, you're going to start building some excitement. But because, and I've seen this go wrong too, because you don't want to waste a reporter's time, you don't necessarily want to build excitement with the reporter, like in 7 days, watch this website because this amazing thing is going to happen. That might not be the best approach. But tomorrow at this time, this amazing thing is going to happen. I want you to have it. Please contact me sometime today. And then in that case, as we talked about pitching reporters, move on to the next reporter. Like if they don't contact you in a couple days, move on to the next reporter. You'll want to tier your reporters, that spreadsheet that you've been creating, you'll want to have them stack ranked. Who is the most valuable reporter to you? Who is the next most valuable reporter to you? And then maybe even by different story types. So did that answer your question? Great. I would take a two-step dance approach to that. So GeekWire loves launches, loves funding a little bit more, loves launches. I would give it to them until X period of time, and as soon as they publish, I'd then send a press release. Because it will not diminish the value to the Wall Street Journal if GeekWire published it 5 minutes earlier. So I think you can, if you want to lock up one for sure media outlet. And I've had press releases, and I think every PR practitioner has, that have not been picked up. So there is a chance that they just drop, they just fall, and you don't get pickup. So I think you'd want to hedge your bet a little bit, secure one placement, and then send out a press release more broadly. You can pay for a service that will ensure that there's pickup. All right, so the question here is when to offer an exclusive, when to send a press release, and when to pay to have your press release sent out on a wire service. So a little background on wire services. Wire services guarantee that your press release will get pickup. And they do this through relationships with media websites, and they're published and searchable. They're not often on the front page. So you'll find them on the back pages of KHQ in some city you haven't heard of. But you might find them in some very prestigious publications as well, Bloomberg. And then in a media play, you can take that badge from Bloomberg, put it on your website, and say, as seen in Bloomberg. So there's definitely a value to it. Price tag is $750 north per push of the button, per release. You can spend a lot more. You might be able to spend a little bit less depending how you segment. So there's PR Newswire, there's Business Newswire, and you can create an account and you can send out a press release. And it will get pickup. So it's great searchability. So then that's the three-step process. I would definitely, and I've used this before on news that isn't news, but is news to me, I would use a PR Newswire, or Business Newswire, or Business Wire. That would be talent acquisitions, new VP of X, or there's a lot of news that's actually new, so I might try that route first. But there are some moments where you're like, I want people to know this, but this is hard to get into a news publication. But GeekWire would love to pick that up. They love the funding rounds. So I would try one guaranteed, lock in one media outlet, and then send out a release after it publishes. And even, track it, keep refreshing or set up an alert, and as soon as it posts, hit go, and then send it out to, where your investors read, because we want to follow up on that. That's a great question. So we're talking about PR cadence. How often do you send news out to the media? I'm just going to put this down real quick. I think the answer to that question is maybe a little broader, where when I onboard clients, one of the first steps is we build out a PR calendar. So we look at where we can be in the media because we want to establish a cadence. So your question is right. Like you don't want to have two press releases. We've acquired funding, and now we've launched, and then hopefully we sold. Hopefully there's 3 press releases all told. But you want to maintain a cadence to the media. So there's a lot of investigation and discovery in how can you maintain that cadence. Maybe it's through innovation. Maybe it's through new offices, and as we're story finders now, ideally. Where else can you find a story when you're in these troughs of media awareness that could get your name in the media? Do you have someone on your team who's something? Is there an angle with maybe not your innovation or your business, but something around your innovation and business where you can be an expert on? Can you sit on a panel? And is that worth a press release? Can you have a speaking engagement and put that in a trough and then send out a press release about your speaking engagement and let people know where they can find that video? So there's definitely a cadence, and there's some creativity involved in how to maintain media awareness. So not an easy answer, but I think you're definitely on the right track with wanting to maintain not just 2 releases a year, but having much more of a broader awareness in the media. So the question is how to utilize LinkedIn to achieve your business goals, and where is there a threshold, and when to maybe execute some paid content, invest a little bit in LinkedIn. So I think what's most important is to kind of approach it with Mr. Covey's approach. Like begin with the end in mind. What is your ultimate goal with LinkedIn? If it's business partnership, it's probably worth doing some paid around that, because you're able to so strategically target that you can find the people will be making the decisions, or ideally will be making the decision. Organic growth is difficult and it involves, back over the question here, having a calendar and a cadence to publication. So you're literally paying either way. One is with time and investment in content in your personal time. Other is, financial investment. So there's no down the middle. But what I find is useful sometimes is collateralizing both. Producing content and then paying to raise its awareness is also useful. So a little bit of both. Yeah. All right, good question, Dan. Thank you. I put that in my pocket and I make sure that I can amplify that on social. I make sure that if I have a newsletter, which is a great tool, that I put that out in my newsletter for my clients or prospective customers. And one quick story about the power of a third-party mention is, if you're not familiar, geocaching is a location-based treasure hunt using a GPS. Been around 15 years, since 2001, a little more than 15 years. They doubled their incoming acquisition maybe a year and a half ago because of this thing called Pokemon Go. They did no press of their own. They were mentioned merely in media about Pokemon Go. So, very similar to geocaching. Suddenly, they're getting twice the amount of interest than they were before. And then they amplified it. Then they put that out on social. Then they send that out in press releases. Then they try to get their own media interest in this other phenomenon and play that card again. So we want to build these media collaterals like a press kit that you can use for months ideally, or years even better, when you make an initial investment. But like, the world of a single investment in a campaign is difficult financially to justify. So if you are mentioned in a third party, keep that in your pocket. And then when you receive interest, I'm not sure your product or your company, when you receive interest, even build out a boilerplate to send to people with these mentions. As seen in X, in association with CoMotion. And that helps increase your credibility. So it's a wonderful scenario to be in when you just, with no effort, end up in the media. But you want to make sure you press the gas pedal on it. All right. Thank you all. My contact information is there. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to reach out. All right. Thank you.